Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's episode of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to watch the video and spend some time with me. And guys, today we're going to address an all too common problem that people have with spinning outfits, and that's getting line twist and those loops that get in your spinning reel, which causes these big bird's nests. I'm going to show you guys how to avoid that, and also speak to a little bit about line on spinning reels in general. A lot of you guys know that have watched my channel, I do not use Braid To Fluorocarbon on a spinning outfit 95% of the time. There's only one application that I do. Most of the time I use straight fluorocarbon line. We're going to speak to that a little bit, but the main thing I want to talk about is how to spool straight fluorocarbon on a spinning reel without having those hassles from all the fluffs and everything. Get into that today. Also, guys, a couple quick things before we get started. If you guys are looking for a spinning reel or a bait cast reel, guys, please check out Tackle Warehouse, my Tackle Warehouse link. They got every bait caster and spinning reel made, good deals on them. You guys use that link. It's a good way to support the channel. And also, guys, we do have my Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns up on the fishthemoment.com website. These are maps I build for Fish the Moment. They're great resources to give you some good fishing spots on your favorite lake or a lake you've never been to before. I'll have that link in the description as well there. Okay guys, let's talk a little bit about how you want to do this to avoid the problem, and then I'm going to speak to a little bit, just have a little conversation about the advantages of going to straight fluorocarbon line here. Now there's a lot of different reasons that people, get loops and bird's nest in the line. I'm going to get to the common stuff on there, but one of the first things that you probably could do more than anything else is you can avoid a lot of this just by visual inspection before you cast, because most of the time, in fact, probably 90% of the time, when you make a cast with your spinning outfit like that and you get that big bird's nest off the end of it, it's because there's a loop in the line that caused from line twist. So one of the things that you can do to avoid a lot of this is just simply, right before you make your cast, look at your reel spool, make sure there's not a loop in there, even a tiny one. And if there is, just open your bail and just gently feed it out to get it out. Now that's going to avoid a lot of problems right there. But the way that you put your line on the reel is another big issue with that. One of the big important things to remember is when you're putting line on a reel, and I also, guys, I do recommend spooling with a larger spool. If you buy the smaller spools like that, they tend to be wrapped a little bit tighter. And if you buy a larger spool, like the 600-yard spools here, it comes off the spool a lot better. Also, guys, I'll put my Seaguar InvisX link in the description. This is the line I use with my spinning outfits right here. But make sure, like I said, bigger spools are going to be a little bit user-friendly there. But the main thing is pay attention to how the line is coming off of your spinning reel. Like when you're spooling up and you're holding the spinning reel, make sure that the line is coming off the spool of line the same way that it goes on the reel. And the easy way to do that, a lot of times, is just if you're spooling the reel, give it some slack. And if it coils up like that, just turn the spool over and that'll get you set up on the right way with that. That's a big thing with that. The next thing is when you're spooling line, make sure that you've got a significant amount of tension on the line like that. Because a lot of times if you're just reeling, you're spooling up like this, spooling up. If you don't have enough tension on your reel spool, on your line spool like that, that's going to make it more prone, to getting those, loops in there and causing the loose line to cause more problems with you. And also, guys, to take it even a step further, one thing you can do is wet your line, before you put it on. Now, one of the things that I like to do sometimes is I'll take just like a hand towel, and I'll just get the hand towel soaking wet, and I'll put the hand towel over the line and just start spooling like that. And that line, lubricating it, just makes it seat down a little bit better. That's a big deal with that. And then finally, guys, what you want to do is make sure that you do not overfill your spool with line. So you can see right there the gap that I have. I usually like to leave about 1/8 of an inch gap. If you fill your line all the way flush to the top of your reel there, that's going to cause you a lot more problems. So always make sure that you leave a little bit of a gap there. Now you don't want to leave too big of a gap, because if you leave too big of a gap, like 1/4 of an inch, you're going to lose casting distance. You know, the advantage of having a lot of line on a spinning reel is it gives you a little bit more casting distance. So about an 1/8 of an inch, maybe a 1/16 is a real good. Another factor, guys, too, is it's going to help you if you have a large diameter spinning reel. This is a 3000, it's called a 3000 series spool here. This is a Lew's spinning reel. A lot of spinning reels have what's called a 2500 spool, which is a smaller diameter spool. The larger diameter spool will definitely help you, you know, with less fluffs and less backlashes and that type of stuff. But the main thing, like I said, guys, is just really pay close attention to loops in the line. You can avoid so much of it with loops. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about this Braid To Fluorocarbon, you know, straight fluorocarbon deal. We've done a lot of videos on this, and I sort of want to give a refresher here because it's probably been about a year since I've talked about that. We've got another 30,000 subscribers on the channel. I use straight fluorocarbon line 95% of the time on my spinning reels. I do not like Braid To Fluorocarbon. I'll just tell you right off the bat. I don't like the way that the bait fishes with it. I don't think it gives it enough stretch. I don't like the fact that you've got a big old honking piece of braided line going into a clear water situation, even if you have a big leader. I think using Braid To Fluorocarbon discourages anglers from retying, because every time that you have to retie, your leader gets shorter and shorter and shorter, and then you got to retie your leader and your main line, and a lot of people just don't want to jack with it, and eventually they wind up where their leader is just a couple feet long, and you've got this big piece of braided line going into the water that is visible to the fish. That is one reason, you know, one of the many reasons I don't like that. And ultimately, this is the thing about it, guys, using Braid To Fluorocarbon on your spinning outfits will get you 0 more strikes. There's not one single advantage that's going to get you more bites by using Braid To Fluorocarbon. None whatsoever. But you can distract from the strikes, because a lot of guys use that yellow braid now because it's very visible to see. And if you're in a clear water situation, like the water visibility's, you know, 6-7 foot clarity, and you've got a big piece of, you know, 15-pound test braided yellow line going into the water connected to even a 15-foot leader, you can't tell me those fish can't see that in the water. They can see a freaking translucent minnow in muddy water. They could definitely see some yellow line going into clear water. So yeah, you can catch fish with Braid To Fluorocarbon. I'm not saying you can't, but it's not getting you any more bites. It's like I said, it's discouraging you from retying more. It takes more time to retie. If you're trying to tie a Braid To Fluorocarbon FG knot with a leader knot in there and bouncing around in 2 to 3 foot waves, it's next to impossible. So I just don't like it. The advantages to me for straight fluorocarbon are far outweigh the Braid To Fluorocarbon. Number one, you know, you don't have to mess with it. You just put it on, you're ready to go. You only have to retie 1 knot. The consistency of having straight fluorocarbon in terms of understanding the line stretch that is associated with a straight fluorocarbon is far superior, because when you're dealing with a Braid To Fluorocarbon and then a fluorocarbon leader, you have 2 different levels of stretch going on. You've got the stretch that's on your leader, which is magnified by basically how long your leader is, and then you have no stretch on the braid. So you have these two opposite factors going on there that I just think causes you to lose a lot more fish or break more fish off. That's a big thing with it. But, you know, a lot of people use Braid To Fluorocarbon because it's sort of like a following the sheep herd mentality a little bit. They see these Elite Series guys doing it. They think they got to do it. That's the way they're taught to do it. And it's not, guys. So many of the top spinning reel fishermen that I've ever met in my life, they all agree with me. Straight fluorocarbon is the way to go. And like I said, it's not, I hear a lot of people say, well, I can't afford to spool up all the time, so I just put, you know, braid on there. It lasts me all year. You can do the same thing with fluorocarbon line. All you have to do is stretch it out, reverse it. And oh, one more thing I forgot to add on the eliminating line twist. One thing that you can do, this is an old trick, people have done it for years, is just take your lure off and then idle in your boat and peel off about 50-60 yards of line and just let it trail behind the boat, and it'll straighten itself out a lot of times, and that'll eliminate a lot of problems with that. But really the only time, guys, that I do use Braid to Fluorocarbon is I will use Braid to Fluorocarbon with a barrel swivel and a fluorocarbon leader on a floating worm. Sometimes. If I'm fishing a floating worm real close to the surface, like an inch or so under the surface, sometimes I will use like a 15-pound test braid on a little barrel swivel with like a 2-foot fluorocarbon leader, simply because the way that I'm working that floating worm, the braided line is pretty much out of the water, and I can make a longer cast with it. And on the top of that is I'm setting the hook hard on the floating worm a lot of times, because sometimes I'm using a 2 or 3/0 hook, so it gives me a little bit more power there. But for the traditional spinning rod fishing of shaky heads, drop shot, little swim baits, crankbaits, jerk baits, or whatever, guys, just trust me on this. Try going to straight fluorocarbon. Once you implement those precautions I talked about as far as eliminating fluff, you're not going to have that. It's not going to be that big of a deal. And here's another thing I'll tell you about that is if you go fishing throughout the course of a year, and let's say, for example, you go out and you're fishing your spinning outfit and you get one fluff every other trip that you're going out there, the amount of time that it's going to take you to pick that fluff out and retie versus the amount of time that somebody is going to jack and mess with retying 2 knots, a leader knot and a mainline knot over the course of 2 days, you're going to have more fishing time. The amount of downtime that you're going to have is going to be less than the guy using the Braid to Fluorocarbon. So this is one of those things that people get really sensitive about it, that I talk about it, because most people that are fans and adamant Braid to Fluorocarbon users, they have not used straight fluorocarbon extensively. And here's what I'm going to talk about, guys, or here's what I want to reiterate, that I'm not just saying this to hear myself talk. I started out like everybody else when I was using spinning outfits, using mono on it. That's all we had. And then when we had fluorocarbon came about, I switched to fluorocarbon and, figured the issues out with that. And then when this Braid to Fluorocarbon, trend started taking place big time, probably about, it's been close to 15 years now, about 15 years ago, I spent an entire year experimenting with both of them. I'd go out, and what I'd do is I'd have half my spinning rods set up with Braid to Fluorocarbon. I'd have half of them set up with straight fluorocarbon. Guys, after a year of experimentation, of using both extensively and learning different knots and all this type of stuff, I came to the conclusion that if you listed the advantages and disadvantages of using straight fluorocarbon over straight braided line, the advantages of using straight fluorocarbon in my year-long experiment far outweigh the Braid to Fluorocarbon. Most people that use Braid to Fluorocarbon have never done that. They've never taken a year to have this in-depth experimentation using different lures, lure categories, different type of retrieves, different type of line sizes, and I did. So I can speak to that, from somebody that has really dug into this in a deep way. So if you guys have ever fished with me as a co-angler or with an on-the-water lesson with me, you know that I use straight fluorocarbon all the time. But I just want to highly suggest it, man. Get you some of that Seaguar and Vizex. That's the best line for a spinning outfit. Follow those tips I talked about, and guys, I think you'll be very happy with your choice to get rid of using Braid to Fluorocarbon. It's really going to help you out. So anyway, hope it helps you guys catch some. We'll talk later.